I always sound the same. I always run out of ideas. I'm stuck in a rut. These are some of the most common problems that I hear from students about playing lead guitar. So today I want to talk to you about how I deal with these problems. First, you need to figure out what your problems are, because your problems might be slightly different to my problems, and our problems might be really different to Nigel down the road's problems. So what is the best way to figure out what the problems are? You have to stop playing and listen to yourself. Now this sounds really obvious, but how often have you actually done this? I didn't, and I started to record myself over the course of a few weeks. And when I'd listen back to these recordings, I would really think objectively about what I was playing. So give it a try and let me know in the comment section what your problems are. In my playing, the problems were actually really simple and very common. The reason I sounded the same was because I was always playing the same thing. The reason I ran out of ideas was that I was playing too much, and I never noticed when I actually did play good ideas because I just wasn't listening to myself and I wasn't listening to the music either. The reason I was stuck in a rut was because I wasn't playing in a musical way. The next thing that I had to do was to stop playing everything that I would normally play. This was a lot trickier for me to do than I thought it would be. As guitar players, we spend a lot of time learning patterns and learning licks and scale runs and all this kind of stuff, and we need to spend a lot of time repeating these things when we're practicing. After all of this repetition, your fingers get really familiar with these patterns and shapes, and I realised when I was listening back to the recordings of myself that my fingers would go into kind of like an autopilot, and this muscle memory would just take over. I wanted to start working on this connection between my hands and my mind and thinking about what I'm playing, and I really needed to start paying attention to what I was playing over. So this is where a loop pedal comes in handy. Now you can use backing tracks as long as you know what chords you're playing over, but I do find a looper to be the best tool for these exercises. If you are interested in loop pedals, I've left a few links in the description box below this video. I would loop different chord progressions in different keys, and I'd play along with these loopers, but just playing a chord tone for each chord. Now you will really need to think about where the chord tones are on the neck and within the scales and the shapes that you know already, but the biggest challenge here for me was that I was so used to overplaying that just playing a single note for every chord just felt a bit strange. But I forced myself to do this, and then when I did start feeling comfortable with the chord tones and really knowing them for whatever chord progression I was playing over, I would start adding in just a couple of passing notes. Now I'd always make sure that I'd hit the chord tones when the chords changed, and I really focused on keeping things simple and not getting lost. If I'd get lost and I didn't know where I was in the chord progression, I'd just go back and start playing the chord tones again. I wasn't playing anything fancy or technical. I could tell when I listened back to these recordings that I was making when I was practicing that I was already sounding so much more musical, and I was playing with the music instead of just playing over it. But my playing didn't really sound very interesting yet, so I needed to start using the stuff I was practicing here to create melodies, which brings me on to one of my favourite exercises. But first, you need to put the guitar down. And I really do mean put the guitar down. We guitarists tend to feel a bit self-conscious about this next step I'm going to go through with you, but when you see the benefits, you will find it very rewarding, so please give it a go. Singers won't often think about scales and arpeggios and licks and runs and stuff like that. They will still use these things, but the melody will always come first. So I tried using this approach in my lead guitar playing. So I always start by sitting without my guitar. If you do have the guitar in your hands when you do this, no matter how strong-willed you are, you will probably find that you start playing and then you'll sing what you're playing instead of playing what you're singing, which is going to be the point of this next step. I would sit there and I'd sing some melodies and try to find something that I like the sound of. Da, 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 da. I am not a good singer, and it doesn't matter because no one is going to hear it apart from you in this video. I find the best melodies to turn into guitar solos are usually really simple, catchy. The cheesier the better. The ideas you come up with will be easy to find on the guitar if you know your scales and you've been practicing the chord tone practice that we talked about earlier. It really is amazing how often I come up with 3 or 4 note melodies that are really simple, that are just taken from the pentatonic scale that we're all really familiar with. But the melodies I come up with will be something that I would never ever have played or come up with from just noodling around on the guitar. These types of melodies are now going to be perfect to be used as the foundation of your playing, and they're going to become the theme of your solos, but they still don't sound like guitar solos yet. So at this stage, I'd now start using different articulations to play the melodies, which always makes these melodies just come to life. So I want you to try different techniques like bends, vibratos, hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, whatever techniques you like the sound of when you're playing the melodies you've come up with. This is when my playing really started to sound more controlled and more like me and more like something that I was happy with. And I like to think that my soloing is now based on melody and creating melodies that fit perfectly with the music, and then the articulations that I choose to use are used to add my personality to the music. Our ears are really drawn to repetition, which is why I think it's really important to actually play melodically, because people really latch on to melodies. But I don't want to just keep playing this same melody that I've come up with over and over again, because I think it'll get a bit boring. So I want these melodies that I come up with to be used as kind of a springboard and to be things that I keep coming back to and referencing, which gives the playing more purpose. So I like to try and add some form of melodic structure to the melody. Now, if you listen to any of your favourite songs and see if you can spot any recurring melodies or variations to the melodies, and think, how are these melodies structured? This will give you lots of ideas that you can experiment with when you're playing. If you've not played like this before, a really good melodic structure to try is an ABAC structure. So if you see the melody that you come up with as melody A, and then you make a slight variation of that melody for melody B, then you'll go back to melody A again, and then you finish it off with melody C, which is going to be something completely different. It could even be a fill or a lick or something just to take you back to melody A again. So this is something that you can experiment with, but do make sure that you keep coming back to the initial melody, as, like I said, we want the listener to be drawn to this melody and find something recognisable in your playing. So by this point, my approach to playing lead guitar had completely changed, and I would have no problems now using the licks and the scale runs and all the other things that I used to play all the time, but I don't use them in the same way anymore. I don't really run out of ideas in the same way as I used to. I like to think that I have my own sound, but I don't always sound the same. I still like to learn new licks, and I like to use licks in my solos, but rather than them being my solos, they're just something that I use in my solos. And I think you're going to find this video inspiring to watch next. Don't forget to check out my Patreon page, where you can support the channel for as little as the price of a cup of coffee once every month. It really helps me keep making these videos. So I'll see you next time, guys.